What's up everyone, and welcome to another Minecraft farm tutorial. In this video, we're going to be looking at the cactus farm. I designed this cactus farm in Bedrock, but it also should work in Java as well. I'm pretty sure that there are no differences when it comes to cactus farms, especially because there is no redstone. This farm is super duper simple and easily expandable. You can make it as big as you want or as small as you want, so that you can get all the green dye that you will ever need. Now the way that I duplicate my very first cacti tends to be, going to the desert, picking some up, and then coming back to my base or my mine or somewhere that I'm going to be hanging out and placing sand 3 or 4 blocks away from each other with a cactus on top, and then go back through and mine out the sand. This way it actually prevents the cactus from breaking on the other cactuses. Cactuses will destroy items, so it's nice to keep them separate from each other. That way you don't actually lose any, especially at the very beginning when you don't have very many. Cactus is one of the most slow-growing plants in Minecraft, so getting your initial ones is kind of time-consuming. Also for this video's sake, I turned up my random tick speed. This way, you can actually see the cactus farm pooping out babies constantly, rather than on the default of 1, where you might get 1 or 2 babies every couple of minutes. Cactus farms are really slow, so in my experience, I tend to build them when I need a stack of green dye now, and so it takes forever to get that stack. But then after I use it, I don't really need any more green dye, so then all of a sudden I'm overrun by cactuses in no time. Now the cactus farm is actually very simple. It's actually the very first farm that I ever built in Minecraft, way back in beta. There are a bunch of subtle nuances though that we will discuss throughout this video, such as cactuses getting stuck or cacti getting destroyed by the other cacti, stacking the farm, expanding the farm. Everything about this farm I will try to discuss so that you will know exactly how it all works, so that you can build the perfect one to fit your needs. And since cactus grows so slowly, I would recommend building this at your base or in your mine, somewhere that you're going to be all the time. And as for materials, you will either need iron bars or glass panes, but it's so cheap that I don't even think we need a materials list. The build area for the initial cell is going to be 11 by 11. Now the outer perimeter is going to be a wall, probably made out of glass, but you can build the wall out of anything you want to. You're also going to have a chest in this corner with a hopper going into it. Now this front canal is going to be 8 blocks wide because you're going to place a water bucket on this far side, and you want it to just barely reach this hopper, like so. You'll be left with an 8 by 9 area in the center, which is where your cacti are going to be located. Now first, start off by placing some wall blocks around the exterior just so that you know exactly where the wall is, and I tend to build the wall as I go to give me somewhere to stand to help me building the farm. Now this interior section is going to be 8 blocks deep. That way, when you place water buckets on this back wall, it will barely reach the canal without overflowing. I would recommend placing the water just to test it to make sure it's the correct length, but I wouldn't recommend trying to build the farm with the water there. It will push you around and slow you down and cause you some grievance. But we're going to place some temporary blocks 1 block away from each other in this pattern like you see here. We want these blocks to be 1 block away from the wall and 1 block away from each other. And once you get these blocks, you can place glass panes on top of them, or you can use slabs or iron bars. I tend to use glass panes because of how cheap they are. Slabs are also cheap, but they're a little more awkward to actually place because you need a top slab on the right above the temporary block. You can use a full block right above your temporary block instead of a slab or a glass pane, but especially on the back row, occasionally a cactus will get stuck on the full block and not actually get pushed by the water. Now again, also, you can use iron bars if you so desire, like if you have an iron farm. For the tutorial, I will probably use iron bars just because they are easier to see. But once you get your glass panes, iron bars, or slabs placed, break out your temporary blocks. And next up, we're going to place sand on top of all of our glass panes, or our slabs or iron bars, whichever one you used. Glass panes are just cheaper, so that tends to be the default. But you can use red sand or you can use normal sand. Cacti will grow on either one of them. And then we're going to plant our cactus on top of all of the sand blocks, like so. Next up, we need to make the walls higher so that we can actually create the harvesting method. Luckily, cactus is unique in that it breaks itself when it comes into contact with another block, so you don't actually need any sort of fancy harvesting method. You simply either need glass panes or iron bars. So build your walls up until it is 1 block above the cactus, and then we're going to place glass panes or iron bars down one of the row diagonally in between the cacti. And then we're going to break out our glass panes or iron bars and only leave the ones that are adjacent to the cactus. So now, when either of these rows grow, the cactus will be touching that iron bar and it will automatically break itself. So then we're going to need to skip a row and come back to these and do the same thing. This way that every single cactus is adjacent to either an iron bar or a glass pane. Again, I'm just using iron bars because it's easier for you to see, but glass panes typically is the default just because it's cheaper unless you have an iron farm. And that's the majority of the farm. All that's left is to place the water in the canal and to finish up the walls. So next up, place your water buckets all along the back so that the back row is completely water source blocks. Once you do this, the water should come up flush with the front canal like so. So this will push all of the cactuses into the front canal for collection. Now all that's left is to finish up the walls, so be sure to place walls on the very front so that cactus don't escape. And that's it for the base design. You could stop here if you don't need tons and tons of cacti, but if you want to expand the farm, we'll go over that now. The easiest way to expand this farm is out the back. We will also go over expanding it other directions if you don't have space to expand it out the back. But break out the back wall if that's what you want to do, and then go back by 7 blocks. So the first row will be next to where you placed your water source blocks, and then the next 7 will be solid blocks, and then surround it by walls. So now you will have an interior section that is 8 blocks deep, and just like with the first section, we will now place temporary blocks 1 block away from everything else. So 1 block away from the other cacti, and 1 block away from the walls. Then we'll place our glass panes or iron bars or slabs on top of these temporary blocks, just like last time. It also might be a good idea to just double check to make sure that it's 8 blocks deep by placing water buckets along the back to make sure they end up flush with the front section. But then, of course, just like the first section, we're going to place glass on top of our iron bars or glass panes or slabs, whichever you chose, and then we're going to plant our cacti on top of the sand. And that's basically it. Now we just need to build up the walls, which for the back section will be 1 block higher than the front section, since we went up by 1 block to allow for the water canal to function properly. But then we're going to place our iron bars or glass panes, just like the first time, in a row, and then break out every other one, so that you end up with a single pane in between the cacti, just like you see here. And now since these cover the first 2 rows, you don't have to place one in the middle, so we'll place our last row back here in between the back 2. And now every cactus should have an iron bar or glass pane diagonally up from it. And that's it. All that's left now is to remove your temporary blocks and to fill up the canal with water. So really, when it comes to expanding this farm, you're just building more sections and making sure that the water matches up. Which also means that if you're tight on space and the water doesn't match up, just remember that you can always use like signs and things like that to block water flow. You don't want the water overlapping because it leaves some dead areas, but you could always block the water so that it doesn't create any problems. But if you wanted to expand out the side, for example, if that's the direction you need, same way as the back, we will break out the side wall and then go back by 7 blocks. And really going back by 7 blocks, again, is just a preference because water will travel 8 blocks. And so if your canal is less than 8 blocks, again, you can place signs at the very end to block the top water so that it doesn't flow into the bottom water. And if you're tight on space and can't make it wide enough to where you have 4 cactus per row, you could always just make less cactus. You can have rows of 3 or rows of 2. It just depends on the space that's available. But if you like symmetry, and you want to keep each section having 4 cacti per row, you can always go left or right by 1 on this side row. It's okay if you go left by 1. If it flows into that top water, it'll still work. Or if you go right by 1, the rightmost tile will flow directly into the collection canal, which is also fine. For this side expansion example, I won't waste your time by showing you how to build the cactus yet again. I bet you get the idea, but just be sure to place your water buckets to make sure that the water flows the correct distance before you build your cactuses. You can also spam throwing in items to make sure that the items end up where they're supposed to go and that the water isn't creating any dead spaces or anything like that. Now, as far as expanding upwards, this is doable, but I would not recommend stacking it like you see here. If you stack it like this, most of the cactus will get destroyed on other cactus. Instead of directly stacking the cactus on top of each other, I would recommend building a ceiling, which will also act as a floor. So go ahead and build a ceiling on top of your pre-existing cactus, and then we'll use this as the floor. However, you will want to go up by an additional block beforehand. Because if you just cap it off and build 8 back the way it is now, if you have a back row that's up by 1, the back part of your ceiling will be directly diagonal up from the row of cactus, which will prevent the cactus from actually dropping down and reduce your rates. So just remember that you want your ceiling to be 2 blocks above the cactus, not only to prevent it from being diagonally up from the cactus, but also if it's just 1 block above the cactus, some of the cactus won't be able to fly off in the correct direction and it will land on top of itself, thus destroying itself. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but for now we'll go ahead and build the example of going up and building another cactus cell above your other ones. So you want to make sure that it's flush with your collection canal. That way the items will drop straight into your collection canal, so it's going to be identical to the cell below it. So after building the first row that is flush with the canal, go back by 7 blocks so that you're left with a platform that is 8 blocks deep. Then we're going to place some walls so that we know exactly where the walls are, and also so that we can test our water buckets to make sure it is the correct distance. So we're going to cap it off right here, which is 8 blocks away from the front. Then we're going to place our water just to make sure that it doesn't flow off of the edge, and it should come up flush like so. And like before, we will place down our temporary blocks, making sure they are 1 block away from the walls and 1 block away from each other. And then we will place our glass panes with our sand and our cactus on top of that, and then we'll be ready to build the walls and get rid of the temporary blocks. So always be sure to fill in the front so that the cactus can't escape. And again, your walls can be any block that you want them to be. It doesn't have to be glass. I would recommend glass if you're building it outdoors so that it can get sunlight. But if you're building it like underground or something, it definitely doesn't matter if you build the walls out of glass or not. Just make sure to include torches or light blocks or something like that to give the cactus light so that it grows faster. And actually, even if you are building this above ground, I would recommend including light blocks in the design or torches, just to light it up at night. The more light that plants have, the faster they grow. And so if you don't include light, then at night they won't actually grow because they're not receiving any light. You might even have mobs spawn inside of the farm, which is never fun to deal with. Typically, I will include sea lanterns or jack-o'-lanterns if I don't have access to sea lanterns. Jack-o'-lanterns are really cheap. It is a carved pumpkin with a torch, and you carve pumpkins with shears. So it's super easy to include it in builds to increase the light levels for things such as cactus. But as you can see, you can also expand the upper levels if you want to, the same way as you expand the bottom levels. Just break out a wall, go up by 1, and build 7 blocks back so that you have an 8-wide water canal, and then build your cactus. But also, this is the reason why you don't want to leave the water in there while you're building it. Removing these temporary blocks while fighting against the water is very, very hard. Maybe you have depth strider, so it's a little bit easier, but either way, it just causes a little extra headache, and you want things to be as easy as possible. And once you're finished expanding it, be sure to close up this side hole. You don't want cactus popping out of it. I typically leave this open while I'm working on it though, to give me a place to easily move in and out of the farm. But also, for these iron bars or glass panes on the inside, very, very rarely, a cactus can actually get stuck on top of the bar. I've never actually seen this happen on single tick speed, but apparently it does once every here and there, so I would recommend just going up by 1 more with your glass panes or your iron bars, whichever you used. I'm sorry for not including this earlier, but it's so rare to happen that I didn't notice it until, after I was recording this video with tick speed turned way, way up. Also, just remember that you want your ceiling to be at least 2 blocks above the cactus. If you have your ceiling only 1 block above the cactus, then sometimes when it grows, the item will hit the ceiling, which will reduce its arc of travel, and so it will fall back down upon itself, destroying itself. And we don't want that. We want to keep these rates as high as possible, so make sure that your ceiling is at least 2 blocks above the cactus. The items won't pop up more than 2 blocks, so having a 2-block gap in between the cactus and ceiling is a totally safe number, and as we can see, with no roof or with a roof of 2, it doesn't interrupt the cactus, so a lot more of them fall down into our collection system than fall back down upon themselves. So just be sure, again, to go up with your glass panes or iron bars by an additional 1 so they don't get stuck on top of that, and then place your ceiling on top of those bars or panes. That will ensure that the ceiling is 2 blocks away from the cactus. And that's all we got for this episode. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, favorite, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out, it makes me happy, and I can't keep making these videos without your support. If you're one of my subscribers coming back to watch yet another Minecraft video, thank you so much. You are totally awesome. And even if you're not subscribed, I appreciate you being here. I love spending time with all of you, and I really hope you enjoyed. Consider subscribing for more redstone farms, redstone tutorials, mini games, and more. And if you have any requests, just let me know and I will do my best to get them done. In the video description, there is a link to my Discord. Join me there to talk more about Minecraft, share pictures of your builds, find players to play with, or ask me questions about redstone. Thank you again for watching this video. I really appreciate it, but that's all we got. So until next time, I'm I've been your host, OmLedu, hopefully teaching you a farm trick or two, and reminding you, as always, don't forget to have fun. Bye-bye.